It's hard to hear God's calling when you're listening for man's feedback. So all I want for you to do today is to let today be a sign. Let today be the moment that you stop worrying about man's approval and you start focusing on what God has already anointed within yourself. Because a lot of times we get so outside of ourselves. We get so outside of what we already know to be true. Many times we start seeking what the world can offer us. We get so desperate. We allow anxiety to creep up. We allow the deception from the enemy to distract us or to deceive us into thinking that all of God's promises are null and void. We stop thinking that God's promises will come to pass. And not only is that not biblical, but it shows that a lot of times our faith is weak, or that we're lacking faith in certain areas. We may have faith in this happening and knowing that God can come through here, because maybe we've seen God show up and show out for us there. But we may have trouble in other places. I know me personally, I had faith in just about every other aspect of my life until it came to financial, because for me, money was an idol. So it was hard for me to bring money down and keep God first. It was hard for me to let go and let God into my finances. And to be honest, when I did make that change, God fortified my faith. And an example of how he fortified my faith was when I made that prayer to say, God, I give you my finances, Lord, take control of everything. Like, if it's not for me, remove it. And I lost a lot of money. I lost a big client in a time where I didn't need to lose a client, right? And I felt like I was going through that Job season. But as I was going through that process, it was difficult, right? I even got mad at God. I felt like God let me down. But it wasn't until I realized that this too shall pass. And not only will it pass, but this too is a test. This too is me getting my faith fortified. I didn't even have to do anything extra, and God brought more to me. All I had to do was keep the faith. All I had to do was stay steadfast. All I had to do was literally pray for long suffering, right? The ability to have patience and faith in difficult situations or in troubled times, that long suffering. A lot of us are lacking that fortified faith simply because we have not given God everything. We want God's hand to be in everything, but we haven't allowed God to be in everything. We want God to step in. We want God to show up and show out, but we're not giving God enough room. And for me, it brought me back to Romans 12:2. And it says, and do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God. You see, the problem for a lot of us is that we want God's will, but we don't want God's way. You see, the problem for a lot of us is that we're still so stuck into our own timeline. We're still so stuck into how we perceive that our life should be, when we haven't. It took a moment to realize that our life is not our own. No, our life is not our own. We were bought at a price. And you see, the problem is God is calling you, but you have to be willing to answer the call. You have to be willing to say yes. You have to be willing to pick it up. A lot of us haven't been willing to pick it up because we're still trying to get what the world has promised us. We're no longer trying to listen for what God has to say, or it's even harder to hear what God's voice is saying. It's hard to hear God's direction. It's hard to hear God's guidance, simply because we're so focused on listening to man's feedback. We're still so focused on trying to get a mentor, or what this guru has said, or we're still trying to figure out how to win in this or win in that because somebody else won in this and somebody else won in that, and they said that this is the way to be successful. See, the problem is a lot of times the enemy will deceive us into thinking. The problem is a lot of times the enemy will deceive us into thinking that success comes from money. You see, the problem is a lot of times the enemy will make us confused, and we think that the success is not already within us, that we weren't fearfully and wonderfully made, that we weren't created and crafted and molded into God's image, that we weren't a part of God's plan, but we were just something that happened by circumstance. A lot of times the enemy will make us feel like we are nothing. And the truth is, that's just a lie from the pit of hell. But it's hard to discern that when you're no longer listening to God, but you're listening to man. You see, the thing is, God has anointed what man hasn't approved. And so although man may have not approved you right now, although man has not approved you yet, God has already anointed you, and he's anointed you, and he's done it from the very beginning. Now, you think I'm just saying that. You think I'm just being cute, right? No, what I really want you to understand is that this is not just by circumstance. This is divine intervention. The reason why you're watching this video right now is because there is a message that God has for you. There's something that you need to know. And the fact is, Hosea 4 verse 6 says that my people are being destroyed because they do not know me. And the problem is, you don't know what God is saying to you. You don't know what is God saying to you. And the reason why you don't know what God's saying is because you're no longer listening for his instructions. You're no longer being still and knowing that God is who he is, right? You have to be still and know that God is who God is. You have to know that God's promises will and shall come to pass. You don't have to worry about what man is doing when you already know that God is operating in your favor. I want you to get to the point. I need you to get to the point. You must get to the point where you're willing to sacrifice everything that the world has said, everything that the world has told you, so that you can step into what God has already designed you for. You see, the great thing about God is God will never create a life for you that you need to run away from. See, the great thing about God is that God will never bless you with anything that will compromise you. See, the great thing about God is that if he closes one door, you know that another one's opening. And I realized that for myself. I'm speaking out of testimony. I realized that when God closed one client, and I thought that was the biggest thing, I was like, man, I even cried, right? I shed tears, not because I lost money, but because I thought God was letting me down. But it wasn't until the moment where I realized that this too was a test. This was a fortification. See, the thing is, a lot of times we start feeling doubtful when everybody else is winning around us. But yet we're the ones that have the strongest relationship with God. Like, God, how are you allowing this person or that person to win? And I'm the one that's screaming your name. I'm the one that's praising your name high. And yet I'm the one that looks like they're losing. But I want you to realize that that is just a perception from the deception of the enemy. He wants you to focus on lack. That has been the enemy's number one trick from the very beginning. What he did to Eve in the Garden of Eden, right? He tricked her with the perception of lack. God blessed her with everything to partake in except for this one thing. And what did the enemy do? Slid her up and make sure that she focused on the only thing that she couldn't have. See, what I want you to realize this is that there's some things that you may not be able to get. There's some things that you may not be able to get, but realize that some rejection is simply just God's protection. Some rejection is just simply God's protection. He knows that this thing may corrupt you. Scratch it. What if your blessing wasn't even a thing? What if it was simply the fact that we serve a God who can bless? You're not hearing me. What if the blessing wasn't the healing, but simply serving a God who is capable of healing? Simply, the blessing is serving a healer. See, I need you to get out of the point where you're serving God because he's just like a genie to you. I need you to get out of that point where God is just a wish maker. I need you to get to the point where God is the creator of the heavens and the earth, that he's the Alpha and the Omega. I need you to get to the point where that if God was with Daniel in the lion's den, if God was with Moses escaping from Pharaoh in Exodus, if God was with Abraham before all, letting them know that you need to leave your comfort zone, leave your country, leave everything that you know, but from your obedience, I'm going to bless you. I need you to understand that it's your obedience to the call. A lot of us haven't stepped into that new country. A lot of us haven't left our old ways. A lot of us haven't let our old self die, our old sinful self. Or a lot of us haven't left that image or that perfection or that ideal life that we thought was ours. And until you realize, man, it was hard for me too. I'm not trying to crucify you. It was hard for me too. Until I realized that a lot of the things that I thought that I wanted, I didn't even want. It was just social media. It was just society. It was just all these other people implementing what I thought I wanted, implementing their own beliefs. I realized that, like, a lot of the things that I thought I wanted, I didn't even care about. And it wasn't until I got on the other side where I realized, like, hindsight is 2020. I can look back and say, man, I didn't care about that. Or none of this really mattered. My focus was just in the wrong place. So I need today to be the day where you wake up. I need today to be the day where you realign yourself. I need today to be the day where you have that paradigm shift, where you have this revelation that God is calling you. You just have to be willing to answer the call. Scratch it. Not even that he's calling you, but he's been there the entire time. Right? He's been there the entire time. Many times in the Bible lets us know that God will never leave you nor forsake you. Many times in the Bible lets us know that God is with you no matter how high or how low you go. He's been with you the entire time. He's loved you the entire time. And guess what? The crazy thing is he has a plan for you. A plan for you to prosper and not fail. And the amazing thing is when things aren't going to your plan, it means that it's going to his. And he has a plan that cannot fail. So I need you to get to the point where you love God so much and yet you're so obedient that it doesn't matter if your plans aren't going to plan, because you know that there's a greater purpose for your pain. I need you to get to the point where you realize that if I can just answer the call, if I could just mute and shut everything else out, that I can literally open up a line for God, because there's something that God has for you. And it is an amazing, absolute amazing thing. God is doing a new thing in your life. All you have to do is be willing to answer the call. And I'm telling you right now, stop seeking man's validation for what God has already verified. Stop worrying about what man has to say and pick up the phone.